President of the Honorable Supreme Court of Justice of El Salvador as our next speaker. I'm particularly excited about it. I think others will be coming in. We want to be mindful of your time and other speakers. Justice Mejia has been a professor of administrative and constitutional law for 25 years now. He's held key positions in government, his bachelor in legal services at the University of El Salvador, his master's in pluralist law in 2004. We got a time. Who knows what pluralist law is? Pluralist law. I could actually, I love pluralist law. I could hear an hour, the next hour on pluralist law. The idea that legal rules and norms come from more than the state. It comes from other sources, including religious doctrine, the church, local customs, international treaties. But anyway, we'll save that for another day. I'd be excited about it. Mr. Justice also got his doctorate degree, cum laude, at the Autonomous University of Barcelona in Spain. So please help me welcome the President of the El Salvador Supreme Court. Mr. Justice, come on up here. Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. First and foremost, to the President of the Legislative Assembly, congressmen and women of the Legislative Assembly who are with us here today, ladies and gentlemen, justices of the Supreme Court of Justice, colleagues, your excellencies, ambassadors, heads of mission, diplomatic mission, members of the public ministry. I'd like to greet our Attorney General, President of the Intelligence and Security Forum, Parliamentary Forum, to everyone here, heads of delegations from the different parliaments that now visit the land of El Salvador, and also members of the government cabinet, special guests, everyone here today. And this opportunity, right after this wonderful lunch, I'm going to have to talk about a subject which is currently on trend. I believe this is something that is currently reconstructing itself, and that is AI and the risks and challenges which we may face concerning the application of AI within Salvadorans justice. Those before me, I know, have spoken about the modernization of the state as far as a fight against organized crime. We all know there are three types of criminals: common criminals, organized crime, and institutional criminals. And of course, the judiciary is responsible of issuing the necessary penal-related punishment or decisions. Before I get started, when I speak of AI, I like to highlight, now that we're speaking of modernization and legislative assembly and so on and so forth, we have first and foremost a law for the promotion of technological manufacturing. This is in 2023. Then before that, we had the scientific development law, which was implemented by the Ministry of Education, and a law of administrative procedures. What does this have to do with me, you might ask yourself? Well, that law acknowledges a right, which to my way of seeing things is a fundamental right. What's fundamental right? With the right of every single person of being in touch with every single agency within the administration and every single one of the technological resources these may have. Now, I understand that these rights should be understood as a right that every single person has to be in touch with any AI application that the public administration is implementing. And it is very important that this is handled by the administration. In parallel, we have created the Cybersecurity and Security of Information Act in 2024, and also in 2024 we did the Data Protection Act. We passed the Data Protection Act, which at the end of the day, we are the only country in Latin America and the only country in Latin America that has a law to promote AI and technologies. How am I so sure about this? Well, I was just in an academic forum where El Salvador was mentioned over and over again as an example to follow in law. And, and I actually had to present there as well. And I know that I spoke about AI, and this law meets every single requirement, international requirement. And the idea is to set up an oversight body. And this is a very important agency to oversee public policy and anything having to do with AI. As a result of this, we have a regulatory framework that we must understand systematically once it's applied, or for its application and for its implementation. Because I know we've talked about organized crime quite a bit, and one of the challenges that the Salvadoran justice will now have to start facing more and more are cyber crimes, even those crimes or the misuse of AI. Now, we have other regulations or principles considered soft laws, and we have the Ibero-American letter of AI for the Latin American Council of Public Development Policies, which was inscribed to by El Salvador in 2023, and then we have the European regulation, which is a 2024 regulation for /648 and issued in June of 2024. And there we have a series of issues. For example, in this case, the sentence of the Constitutional Court of Colombia, reference conviction 1023-1024, uses paradigm and the use of AI for the implementation of justice. So basically what we have here is we have adopted a system, a civil law system, which our laws tend to provide certain legal definitions, And there's a lot of discussion of what must be understood as AI, but in that sense, we're no longer going to have too many discussions, because our law already determines what AI actually is. AI, which millennials see as not artificial intelligence, but in Spanish, I guess it's anxiety and insomnium. So I guess it's because of all the learning issues and what they have to go through. But AI is exactly that, artificial intelligence. Now, what does the artificial intelligence law state? Well, it asks a computer to do many things which a human can do, but not to the same extent. So AI is the same human intelligence, but it's automated and processed in a language to be able to solve problems or even to set up rules. What's the objective behind all this? Is it an autonomous or semi-autonomous trajectory? And And I think there's several different things, but we can definitely talk about AI, and AI should be used in any given platform of public policy and as a result in justice administration. And that's where it really does have a new example, automated learning, which is part of AI, and that's part of a very common word that we have been using for many years, and entails algorithms and statistical models who allow for a system to improve their performance based on specific experience and based on certain data, big data, or anything we may collect without having to reprogram, and it's explicit for every single task. Meaning that if law for this tells us the road to follow for each and every one of the operators or each and every one of the public administration representatives, in this case for justice administration, and also sets up an algorithm definition. And this is the last one that I'm going to refer to, so it's not too monotonous. So the algorithm says that this is a set of rules, and here we see instructions designed through human intelligence to solve a problem that affects different decision-making issues. So within the framework of AI, you make decisions. Some are linear, and I know we've been discussing so much in certain cases that when it's about authorization, AI behind an algorithm can determine if a permit is issued or not through the instruction provided through the different apps. But when it's about determining, or if it's about analyzing, it's about basically running an intellectual analysis. The algorithm should behave differently, not as a way to solve, but rather as a way that will help solve these problems directly. Solving these problems because you have to set things up. And then within the framework of our AI, and I already mentioned this, we have a national AI agency, which is the way of looking at the way I see things, a regulatory body that should promote every single public policy for AI. And it sets one with its main attributions, technical assistance. And I believe the technical assistance for every single agency or body, government body, and at the same time to create and manage the National Development and Innovation Registry and the rules to apply AI, allowing power of law to guide how that works and to guide public policy that answer to setting up AI. This law sets certain specific objectives. The first one is to promote a favorable environment within El Salvador. I know that many have spoken that there are many conditions for development, development, investigation, research for the different companies, for the administrations that should operate within the framework of AI, and to generate trust within the population in how AI is being used within the accountability principles, equity, and to have these systems operate objectively or impartially, avoiding risks. I know we're going to talk about risk, but in the use of prejudice or misuse of erroneous information. I know we've spoken so much about this, but I realize that there's so many people that work in politics, and we've spoken about the risk of AI during campaigns, political campaigns, and the misuse of that AI to commit crimes of every which nature. And at the end of the day, to see how these actions are implemented responsibly and a principle of responsibility. And it also sets, amongst other aspects, and to improve public service. So imparting justice is not a public service, but rather a public responsibility. And it's a public responsibility because it derives from a direct mandate from the Constitution, and so it has the necessary competencies and skills for the proper operation of every single bit of the government body. And AI, an agency must instill a certain governance, and as a judiciary, we should promote judicial governance based on best cooperation practices, even to solve specific cases and to carry out access to justice in a way that is more efficient for those who should require justice be served. Now, what should AI include as a matter of example? And judicial governance, I mean, that should be based in risks, and this is why the law for promotion should results in the law for cybersecurity, because we're dealing with people's rights. People's rights are definitely here in jeopardy. The right to non-discrimination, the right to equality, and other aspects. And of course, how may we use AI as far as the application of justice administration? Well, solving trials, research, and investigating facts in the law, applying the law or a specific group of facts. This year, I was just in as part of a forum for Supreme Court justices in Brazil, and I saw that Brazil's Supreme Court has a constitutional competition where they are able to summarize cases when they issue their sentencing, and this is an additional help for justices, because it allows them to know the case faster. So it's easier, and this is a tool that they've created themselves to solve specific cases and make justice administration much more efficient. Obviously, administering justice plays a very important, pivotal role within every society, particularly with Salvadoran society, and it's important that we comply with the mandate from Constitution. That's fast and effective justice, and that shouldn't be a dream, but rather something that should be done. Obviously, these governances should be conducted in the necessary timings to avoid any sort of risk, and as well as to try these risks. We're dealing with anti-corruption practices, and AI represents a risk. And how do we fight these risks? Well, we adopt informative records, databases, and install the necessary software to avoid cyber crimes. And it's also important to have specialized checks for human and AI and artificial intelligence.
Because we're not talking about the substitution of human beings. It is not like that. That will go against the Constitution. The Constitution says that the origin and the goal of the Constitution is taking care of the human being. So human intelligence feeds this artificial intelligence, and it's sometimes difficult it is difficult to summarize information, and AI can do this summarized in minutes. They can summarize the facts, history, the law, the frameworks, statistics, etc. That's why it is important to mitigate this risk in the misuse of AI at the moment of solving specific cases. Actually, with this flowchart that I present over here, as you know, or if you don't know it, I invite you today. I invite the foreign delegations with respecting the privacy standards. Of course, we invite you to visit our Judiciary Center against organized crime, which was built in an iconic place of crime. It used to be a city, Soyapango, that was called Soya Panic. It was called Soya Panic because that was a place where you had a high level of danger or high levels of gang crime, and that's actually there where we have built the Center for the Combat of Organized Crime that has 24 judiciary offices. We're doing our job to give a better technological conditions to these offices, implementing in the future very soon digital files and the use of zero paper to solve Salvadoran society problems and to help the Attorney General's office and all the people that require justice to work with due diligence to solve the cases related to these gang members or these terrorist groups, as the Constitutional Chamber says. And in regards of the use of AI, I would like to mention that we have the natural judge, any kind of judge. You always have a judge as it is established by the Article 24th of the Constitution. Of course, that judge must be independent. They need to have the necessary skills and knowledge, and based on the standards of our country, because as Attorney General mentioned, as the Minister mentioned, we come from a system that gave way too many guarantees, and we're transitioning to a system that combats crime respected to diligence, because we don't have to skip these constitutional guarantees or rights. We can combat crime respecting the Constitution and international treaties, but that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that we have a problem with human rights. And as I said, we cannot have the same measures for the organized crime and for the common crime. We're talking about people that will be hardly reintegrated to society. We have tried everything. We have established ceasefires. We have given them benefits already, but these people are still crime machines. Consequently, we need to establish the situations that I mentioned before. We have to avoid bias. Of course, we have to avoid bias to guarantee due diligence. And we even have to establish the elemental rules for the judiciary decisions. We're working on a documenting center, then we're working on building our own apps or own applications. We shouldn't depend on any other organizations. I'm not going to mention the name of other organizations, but were famous organizations that help. They should help us build our own things for our own administration of justice. We need to build this app for the supporting judiciary decisions. And another case that was mentioned by the Attorney Generals in the morning is the risk, avoiding this risk in having irregular situations and misuse of AI. For example, misusing digital evidence that can affect the rights of people. We know that for those situations, of course, we have to make decisions, and at least up to this moment, we're at least for now, we are able to use AI for the text correction, the summarize of cases, and other tools that we can use in our justice administration. And of course, and because most of time we have here the principles that we need to keep, and these are not my principles, these are stated in the law: no discrimination, avoiding bias, the non-substitution of human reasoning, ethics at the time of using AI, data protection, privacy protection, and of course the responsibility that comes from the misuse of AI. And not to take more than the 20 minutes that I was allotted, I want to share some final thoughts. Yes, I can say that the Kurt has worked even more on our digital protocols. This is a shared effort with all my colleagues, justices from the Supreme Court, and we are all working towards the same goal to face the main challenges of this administration, so we can have a secure country with better economical development and better development in general. So I can say that as final thoughts, AI system must strengthen the relationships between the justice administrations and the population. We have to use it to make things simple. I'm not going to mention these bureaucratic challenges, but AI system must protect personal data and intellectual property. Pay attention to this. There is the decision issued by the Administration Tribunal of Mexico that says that intellectual property must be protected. We can not use, for example, AI for plagiarism. That is something that we have to take into account for or the judiciary decisions and at the time of implementing AI. And at the end, AI models, and this is something powerful. These AI models cannot replace humans. Humans who have creativity, emotions, individuality that will have to accompany our generations and all the judges that issue decisions based on impartiality and objectivity. So that was my presentation. I hope that was useful. I thank the organization of this forum one more time, and thank you for being here after the fantastic lunch. Thank you for bearing with me during this presentation, and we're gonna talk about this topic again tomorrow, which is going to be nice. Good afternoon, everybody. May God bless you all.
So much for those great remarks. On behalf of the Parliamentary and Intelligence Security Forum, we'd like to present you with this plaque.
This acknowledgement is also for all the friends or colleagues, justices at the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Next speaker. Victor? There you are. Okay. How are you doing? Good? All right. So you've heard from folks from El Salvador this morning. We're going to switch over to Spain. And the Honorable Victor Gonzalez is a former member of Congress in Spain, been a great friend and supporter of the Parliamentary Intelligence Security Forum. He's a distinguished businessman and member of Parliament in Spain. Very international upbringing, lived in France, the United Kingdom, Ireland, South Africa, and the United States. He also went to school in Spain, in UK, in California, I think University of San Diego, beautiful place. And internationally, he's addressed a number of parliaments like this in Romania, in Guatemala, Peru, Mexico, U.S., and now El Salvador. So he's an international man of mastery, I would say. And, but I think one of his greatest accomplishments, at least in my view, I don't think I could do it, father of 9 children, nueve niños. There must be a typo here, but congratulations to you. Come on up here, Victor.
I'm going to speak in Spanish since we're in El Salvador. Actually, many of the things that I want to say today, I have already heard them this morning as presentations were taking place. I was reducing the time of my own presentation because many of the topics that I want to talk about are already happening in El Salvador. I had the luck to be here in 2018, if I'm not wrong, and I remember that we were at the hotel. I don't know if it was Intercontinental or Sheraton, was one of those two, and they didn't allow us to go out at night. I came here 17 years ago as well, and they didn't allow us to go out at night. I arrived Tuesday night with my 2 eldest sons. We arrived at 11 and we went out walking. We went walking in downtown, and I was surprised because nothing bad happened to us. And as someone who had been here before, it had a great impact. And my children told me, "Dad, but you used to tell us that El Salvador was very dangerous." But that was the past, and now things have changed. Now we have to acknowledge that security, that improvement in the lifestyle of Salvadorans. I had the opportunity to climb 3 volcanoes yesterday with my children, and I'm impressed of the changes taking place in the country. Someone told us in the morning, talk to the people. I had the chance to talk to the people there because we were changing drivers to move around the volcanoes, and there is a feeling of hope. People say, I don't have to migrate to the United States, or I return from the United States. I can be at home, my wife can be at home, we can go out, we can live the life that for us Europeans is something normal. So congratulations El Salvador, and congratulations government. It is an honor to me to participate and share some thoughts about transnational organized crime, about illicit trade and drug trafficking. During many years, the drug trafficking routes have changed a lot. Central America is still this bottleneck for cocaine, for the traffic of cocaine. Depending on the sources you check, more than 80% of the cocaine that arrives to the United States goes through this region, and some sources, like the United Nations, they talk about 90% of cocaine. That is the last report of the United Nations. There are people, when you take a look at the numbers, and I have lived in the United States, and I have a good friend of mine who lost her daughter to fentanyl. You see the number of thousands of people dying because of drugs. This is more than a war. When you were talking before about the figures of homicides in El Salvador, now take that into the context of the United States. But why does this dynamic is still there after all the efforts of the different governments, administration? I believe that there are 3 structural reasons. The first one is the geographical reason. Central American is a corridor with thousands of kilometers of coast and very open borders. The second is the institutional weakness, justice that is captive in many countries, police departments that are fragmented, and systematic corruption that operates as a criminal multiplier, and that is something that has been detained, interrogated from Venezuela, from Bolivia, banned from Nicaragua and Cuba, so I know what I'm talking about. The regional impact of this is devastating. There is an increase in the number of homicide that has sometimes reached war levels. I have worked in offices in Baghdad and other places. There are more people dying because of this war against drug than the people dying in these wars. And the second point is forced migration because of the territorial control of cartels and gangs. And I think that what happened here in El Salvador is a miracle. Mexico is an example of a country where in many areas the government is inexistent and the control is owned by cartels. So in Central America, it's not only about transit, it is also an area of conflict between the criminal organizations and the state, with repercussions on governance, development, and the security of the hemisphere. Organized crime has understood something key, and we have already discussed about this a lot. The one who dominates technology dominates the illicit market. Drones are used for the transport of small shipments and selective attacks between criminal organizations. We have cases in Mexico and in other countries in Central America, and we have already witnessed cases of drones that were modified to launch bombs or to violate security perimeters. Cryptocurrencies, criminal networks use cryptocurrencies for asset laundering and transborder laundering. Problem is not the asset itself, but the unregulated exchanges. Now, crime operates a parallel economic system that makes this asset tracking very difficult, and I know many of you understand what we're talking about. Dark web, my children, many times, especially the firstborn who studies engineering, systems engineering, he tells me that dark web is the place where you can buy digital illicit items, drug, weapons. They operate in very sophisticated environments that were previously reserved just for cartels. This criminality is decentralized and difficult to eliminate. This activity is now no longer fragmented. It is an interconnected system with actors that diversify their portfolios, just like multinational companies, sanitary products, drugs, parts that represents millions of dollars a year. There are many countries that have smaller GDPs. OECD and the Intellectual Property Office of the European Union talk about a criminal economy that is destroying more and more the regular economy. If we talk about environmental impact, we're talking about $258 million in damages each year, and we are in the fastest criminal growing market. We're talking about illegal mining, lithium illegal mining, cobalt illegal mining. If we talk about human trafficking, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because we're gonna hear about it later. Millions of minors trapped in these networks for sexual crimes. In Spain, by the way, we had to include in our GDP numbers, the numbers from the drug trafficking and sexual exploitation, which, as everybody knows, they don't pay taxes. And it was calculated as around 5% of the GDP. Traffic of wild species and organized crime. It's not just a bunch of isolated organizations. It's a global parallel economy with flexible alliances, capacity of innovation, and extreme resilience. Which are the strategic lines that I want to present to you today and that I invite you to think about? Before these evolutionary threats or policies have to evolve faster than those of criminals. First, we need integrated regional intelligence. It's not enough to share information. We need operational fusion, analytic fusion, and standards among states with common data, biometry standards, and financial traceability. Number two, technology for the state. You have already mentioned this before, and I totally agree with this. Crime cannot be better equipped than institutions. It is urgent to invest in analytics, blockchain analytics, anti-drone systems, artificial intelligence, especially for ports, borders, and we need to invest on better digital forensic capacities. Financial combat, dismantling and hitting the economical flow of these organizations is more effective than seizing big drug shipments, and that's why we need independent financial units. We need cooperation with private sector, and we need international regulations in different areas, and regulation in the crypto markets. And fourth, strengthening the presence of the state in the vulnerable territories. Security is not imposed by the use of the force of the police. It is built through justice, investment, and economical opportunities. That's in those places where the state is absent, crime will fill that gap. In this case, we can see the example of Mexico, for example. I think that we had elections in Canada, Argentina. I remember elections in Peru when Castillo won office, in Bolivia when Arce won. And we talk about these areas where we had narco mayors, narco provinces, where the radical left parties won elections thanks to the support of cartels and drug dealers. And to conclude, allow me to include a less visible dimension, but a relevant one for our analysis of trans-bordering threats. Thousands of Cubans are fighting today in Ukraine. I mentioned this in a forum in Madrid. This has already been published. The government of Ukraine it's willing to deliver these Cuban prisoners in exchange of political prisoners. The government of Ukraine has the Cuban prisoners, and they have recovered the corpses of Cubans. But why is this relevant? What is happening? And what does this has to do with the? What does it have to do with the combat to organized crime? It represents the use of citizens of other countries that is proof of the international trafficking of people. Many of these young people that were deceived are captured using networks similar to the ones used by organized crime. One of the young men was the musician. He went working to Russia, and when he arrived, he was taken. His passport was taken from him, and he was sent to the front. There is the cases of young men from South Sudan that were with scholarships go to St. Petersburg, but they were taken prisoners and they were sent to combat at the front. That also represents a security gap in Latin America, and especially for Central America and the Caribbean. The return of combatants with military training and PTSD, and without the appropriate mechanisms for their integration, is a factor known to be a threat for the social stability. So the region can face the appearance of new hitman networks and parallel actors. We have the most advanced combat front in Ukraine, where thousands of Cubans are fighting. Many of them will come back here, and they will be part of these cartel networks. They will have access to technology, to the use of drones, and they will have access to a new way of waging war. I think that giving the visibility to this situation and to prepare for that is something key. There was a presentation 4 weeks ago at the Senate in the United States where we talk about this. I encourage you to look for it and to listen to that because it's something that is going to affect you directly. The presence of Cubans in the war on Ukraine is not an isolated fact, but it's another proof of how these networks operate, how they conduct these hybrid operations. So this reality encourages us to strengthen our the regional intelligence, see, and to work on the control and regularization for Latin American citizens. We are facing a transnational technological criminal ecosystem, so our response must be strategic, transnational, and technological. Crime is already thinking globally, and our policies cannot continue operating locally. Thank you so much.
Victor, thank you so much. Just great to hear your remarks. No photographs. Here we are. I think we have a panel discussion coming up. And chairs and table up here. Bear with us. We can ask the speakers to come up as well. Are we all ready? I think so. Okay. Thanks for your patience. Victor, those are great remarks. We're going to follow that with a panel discussion, three expert speakers on migration, human trafficking, and illicit smuggling. We have three expert presenters, the Honorable Linda Moran, who's the Director of National Council for Early Childhood and Adolescence in El Salvador, the Honorable Rene Escobar, General Prosecutor for the Republic of El Salvador, and the Honorable Victor Piera Martinez, Regional Specialized Officer, Interpol Regional Office. So come on up. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to you all.
Bien, muy buenas tardes.
afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Greetings to all here today with us who come in representation or on behalf of the different government agencies, Supreme Court, Department of Justice, congressmen and women from the Legislative Assembly, dearest members of the executive branch, and each and every one of the foreign delegations and members who are part of this forum. We hope that your stay in our lovely country is joyful, fruitful, and that you enjoy every one of our little spaces in our little country, but particularly the warmth that characterizes us as Salvadorans. This afternoon we're going to talk about a very important issue, which is migration, trafficking, and illicit smuggling. We now have a representative from the Public Defender's Office, CONAPINA, and Interpol. So let's get started. I know that we have some things to cover, and welcome everybody. And we hope that your presence here is quite fruitful. We're going to start with the first question. And how would you define, how does the institution define the problematic of, or the issue of human trafficking, migration, and illicit smuggling? What's the strategic role that your particular agency plays when faced with this phenomena? Good afternoon. I'm very grateful for being here. CONAPINA, per its acronym, is the National Council for Early Childhood and Adolescence of El Salvador. This is an institution that is fairly new, so to speak. It's about 3.5 years old. We're going to be 4 in January of 2026. And it's created out of the Growing Together Act. And even though we did have a law to protect children and adolescents before, this was a reactive law. It was a law that only hoped to restore rights. And with the Growing Together Act, which is a law that has, of course, has a way to return rights, it also has a lot of preventive aspects. So as a state, we are doing our every effort to regulate in a way where we hope to prevent and avoid the violation of the rights of our children. Within the framework of our obligations in this issue in particular, CONAPINA attempts to protect our children, our young people, from their early childhood, which is a face that wasn't previously acknowledged by our state. And having or being aware of the risks that our children and adolescents face during migration, and look at all the red flags that may exist when being placed before trafficking, illicit smuggling. That's just part of the roles that we play, and that is to create and ensure within the population, particularly at a local level, creating awareness and just knowing our country and finding opportunities in it. Fantastic. Can you hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us. Speaking of what Interpol does on illicit smuggling and human trafficking, we can definitely say that this situation is alarming, to say the least, complex, and changes quite quickly. So there are so many things that need to be done here in the region. Interpol actually has its mission pertaining human trafficking and illicit smuggling its general mission is to provide support and help members of Interpol here within the region and their endeavors. And the type of support that Interpol provides to member states here in the region, it's about supporting their police force, provide tools which Interpol has readily available for, investigations and special ops here in the region. And so Interpol's mission is to provide the countries the necessary tools and skills and capacities for the member states. So that mission, that Interpol's mission, is directly focused on Interpol's global objectives, which are to connect, to train, to support national authorities, police authorities in countries in the region, and so they may work as one that's focused and that has a direction. We realize that this type of crime, human trafficking and illicit smuggling, is a transnational type of crime. And a country that stands alone or a police that stands alone will never manage to solve or eradicate the problem. So it is imperative that we learn how to work together as nations. And Interpol works as a bridge, so to speak, of contact between nations, providing different tools and different abilities, As a public defender's office, when we speak about how does our agency stand against this issue, I'd like to mention that amongst the competencies of the Public Defender's Office in El Salvador, we have the representation and guarantee of the rights of vulnerable populations. And within these services, we have almost 9 areas that directly oversee assistance to children and adolescents, women, and other vulnerable populations like senior citizens, people with disabilities, indigenous groups, etc. So in that regard, I believe it's very important to highlight, to link the context that we have been hearing about since the morning, because indeed these challenges for any state are much larger when there are complex subject matters as security. So this is why it's really important to discuss this in this context, because indeed it is difficult to identify trafficking, human trafficking, illicit smuggling, when we have extortions, and when we have situations that set up a parallel government. So an organized crime itself becomes a sort of facilitator of these situations when we see that particularly children and adolescents were being co-opted, were being harassed, were being used as tools. And so frankly, this is a situation where most definitely it is a challenge. As a public defender's office, we were able to identify these needs because these people come to us, and so we see firsthand the human drama developing, and this is how we've been able to identify, what tools, what work we are able to do interinstitutionally. I think and believe that the country at this moment in time has a very large opportunity by, implementing coordinated efforts. We have institutions here where we have been able to set up work strategies jointly because we have common goals. When we seek these common goals jointly, the work tends to be easier and it tends to move further. And so as an institution, we originally and naturally provide legal services, legal assistance, but we also have the component of psychosocial assistance, which is also provided by CONAPINA, for example. And in that sense, we're all walking along the same path in the same direction. But we do have a social component in our hands, and that is, things that we do. We do have a strategy, and we have an impact. We have efforts that other institutions are conducting at a social level to be able to correct the issue of security. This is, I know we've spoken about this in prior situations. It is so important that we know that there is so much work to do, and that so much work is being done through different institutions that seek to strengthen, these things to avoid repeating mistakes of the past. We are building the social thread, works with youth, Directorate of Integration that works with a lot of other institutions. We have ISDEM working with women, and so this coordination is extremely easy for us because it can definitely help set up common goals and joint efforts, and discuss things like human trafficking and illicit smuggling. I'd like to now discuss what sort of preventive action does your agency carry out to avoid falling into trafficking networks or illicit smuggling networks. CONAPINA, as I mentioned, is in charge of generating policies, programs, and projects at a national level pertaining early childhood and adolescence. And so we have a plan that we've called the Open Arms Plan, and that is a program which lasts for 4 years. We just wrapped it up, and we're just getting started with the new one, where the Public Defender's Office is part of this process, and it's part of the Open Arms program, where we have a Public Defender's Office, Attorney General's Office, Police, Ministry of Education, health system, so it's this whole sort of universe that is working to avoid immigration or to stop immigration. We have a series of programs at a local level, and we are very clear on the fact that to make sure that policies provide results and to generate the governance that we are all hoping to achieve, it is very important that these things work from the bottom upwards. And that's exactly what we've been attempting to do with the whole protection system. CONAPINA has a consultative committee made up by 45 young people at a national level, which has been chosen by a pool from 890 young people that applied. They have provided their opinions on how do they feel we should communicate with youth to let them know what the risks of illegal immigration are. How does human trafficking and illicit smuggling look? And so we have the local rights committees, which are a legal mandate and that bind us to creating in this territory a certain number of groups that provide their opinions. So now we have policies, programs, and projects are strengthened by what people perceive, what people feel, and that has been the great result of the Open Arms Plan. We also have a process, an orderly process of receiving the migrant population or returnees. CONAPINA has 16 protection points at a national level, and also running coordinated ops with the prosecutor's office, with the police, where we see tolerance centers that allow us to identify behavioral patterns that, as our colleague from Interpol mentioned, and this is illicit smuggling and human trafficking is an ever-changing crime, and that has allowed us to continue to coordinate certain activities so as to modernize processes, tools, and the ways to address this, and particularly with adolescents. And we believe that these populations, this segment of the population, are so much more vulnerable, and they're a big part of what we're trying or attempting to change. And as our colleague from Spain mentioned, it's so very important. But this whole technology aspect, these are very important tools that help a country grow, and particularly our adolescents and our youth. But this is also technologies are a risk to to try to understand their dynamic, to try to understand their language. We must understand where they're headed so we can walk alongside them. Regarding Interpol, Interpol represents several different channels, and we have different departments from Interpol, and so what we're working is to make sure that our young people don't fall into these groups of people, and that whatever they do online doesn't fall into these categories that may harm them. So Interpol uses these means for social media to share this information. Also, Interpol, as I mentioned, Interpol is approaching all these countries to train the different investigative units, police authorities, to provide trainings, and exchange information, the new trends, the MOs that were used before that are no longer used. And the new technologies, because years back a focus of trafficking and smuggling was aimed more on women, women and younger girls. But now that's not the case anymore. Now we can't really just focus on that segment of the population. Criminals are now using other methods, other means to attract their victim through false job offers, social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, other messaging systems like WhatsApp and Instagram. And so criminals no longer need to go, out in the town, to collect their victims. They can do it online. They don't even have to leave their home. And so these technologies are being used to come into contact with potential victims. And for example, you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to send you a GPS location, go there. And And so, we have to get smarter. We have to move faster than the criminals themselves to sort of anticipate their steps. We're living in an era where change is a constant. And so what we need to do is train our police forces. We need to give them tools so that they are able to see the signs and begin their investigations and conduct cyber patrolling, for example. I know that, not every country is currently conducting these cyber patrolling, but, we have these tools, we have these trainings, and we have a virtual academy where, all of the police can come in and obtain and receive to be trained in these tools. Excellent. As a public defender's office, within some of the actions could be shared, and so the director mentioned some of it, but I know that we're working in educational programs, interventions in schools, and where we see, and through our teams, we are able to share with these young people the risks. A lot of times, these risks take place, and the victims don't know that they're victims themselves. So how to help these young people, how to guide them, how to share this knowledge with them, how to understand the risk, how to help them understand the risk they may be subjected to. So it's important to have psychosocial programs because, for example, mental health is incredibly helpful, but this is things get harder when we're trying to help somebody, but they're dealing with a lot of trauma. Girls and adolescents, for example, are very vulnerable to these situations, and this allows for them to share experiences within these spaces and to have a guide that helps them. We have community fairs. As I mentioned, training is incredibly important because when you have specialized areas pertaining adolescents and women, this allows our there might be, there might be some questions, and there might be questions pertaining trafficking or smuggling, and so I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's important that we know what these crimes are and we are able to prevent them, not necessarily just react to them, and particularly with women and, vulnerable populations. Up next question is, how do you take care of victims before, during, and after the administrative or judicial processes? So in the case of CONAPINA, this is an autonomous institution that
competencia en el territorio nacional y contamos con 16 sedes a nivel nacional.
So, when you have multidisciplinary teams that seek in coordination with the public defender to provide trainings, capacity building, informative processes, and we also have a program that I personally love, which is Knowing Your Country. This is a program where we let our our young people know, okay, so where do you want to, what area do you want to get to know in the country? And so we take them to these places and we let them know that within our territory, within our country, there are very beautiful things, and it isn't necessary to migrate. It's surprising that in a country as small as ourselves, as our own, we have adolescents that just never gone to, for example, the historic downtown center. It's surprising to see how children within our very, very small country have never climbed a volcano, or children who've never seen the ocean. Yeah, we're half an hour away, from every ocean in our country. So how do we make sure that our children, our young people, have access to all the wonders that their own country provides, so that they don't feel the need to migrate or to dream with foreign lands that, the public defender won't let me lie. I always joke with him on the fact that, you have divorced couples. Oh, we're like an old divorced couple. I take care of the kids, and he has their legal responsibility. It's weird. All the things he doesn't give me alimony, but that's kind of like. But in this shared exercise with the public defender, we've never hesitated to contact Interpol, the ambassador of Colombia, Argentina, where between all of us, we've always made sure we keep our communication channels open to discuss trials being faced by adolescents or young people who migrated but then become victims of human trafficking and smuggling or smuggling. And that is a very common thing. Colombia is one of our main partners. Mexico, Conapina, also has 16 offices abroad. We have offices in the consulates in the northern and southern border of Mexico, where our teams, our psychologists provide assistance to whomever needs it. It's so very sad. Yesterday I was having a conversation with public defender Conapina. Besides all this, we have 16 welcome shelters where we either welcome or shelter children who was already harmed, who already came across harm's way. And these places we use when we have to remove them from their family homes because they can no longer be cared for by their families. So part of the so we take care of these children in our offices, and that's so. And just yesterday we were discussing this, issue of with us, and so. A lot of our population is currently under shelter, and public defender won't let me lie. And this one comes into a protection mode, and then. Right. So we're talking about when somebody is offering other friends a job and they offer to migrate illegally, and they can and that can lead to situations like prostitution, which will, of course, change their lives. We have been told that by many of our victims that we've helped is that they charge them for a room that they're never going to finish paying. We have, little girls who left when they were 14, migrated illegally when they were 14. They come back when they're 15. They turn into teenage mothers. So the re-victimization of these processes, for smuggling, for trafficking. And I'm speaking from children and adolescents because that's my area, of course. And that and everything began as an internet game, as an internet buddy they met, as a what's up, as a contact in Instagram. That's how things start. Snapchat. I, for example, use Snapchat to understand how it works, and we've seen so many cases of these adolescents who thought they were speaking to one of their peers when they're actually speaking to adults. So this little cycle of violence keeps on happening, and as Conapina representatives of this area and this branch of the government, and this is what we're trying to do. This is what we're trying to move along. This is what we're trying to fight, and we do so along with this wonderful team. I am so happy that I have colleagues that I've been working with from the embassies, from the foreign missions. We're always in touch. IOM, with Interpol, we've always coordinated things, and so I think that exercise, this coordination as a state is incredibly important.
Well, we have very limited time. I've already been given the alert, and I think this is a very extensive topic. I believe that we can discuss all the afternoon about this, but it is important to highlight something. The interinstitutional work in this kind of subject matters is very important when the public institutions are the people-centered institutions, do not limit themselves to doing what they technically have to do, and that's it, but they look for comprehensive answers for the populations they work for, and I think that that's the scenario that El Salvador is living right now, and I'm sure that this great progress we have made in our social area. This is a tough area, but the transformation through the people-centered work will have always positive results. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias. So we're almost there. Last but certainly not least, we have the Honorable Ambassador Carla Sands. And this is a shorter presentation, she assured me. We'll be done well before 5 and work our way to the reception. Ambassador Sands served as U.S. Ambassador to Denmark from 2017 to 2021. She served on President Trump's Economic Advisory Council, and she currently chairs the Foreign Policy Initiative and is Senior Fellow for Energy Policy at the America First Policy Institute. And you'll be hearing from her today on energy and critical minerals. Well, please help me welcome Ambassador Sands.
Thank you so much for welcoming me, and I will be brief because I know I'm standing between you and cocktails. But I want to thank the Parliamentary Intelligence and Security Forum for holding such an impactful event. I want to thank J.C. Boggs. Thank you, J.C. Thank you, Congressman Pittenger, for honoring and facilitating all of these discussions that we've enjoyed throughout the day. I also want to thank the El Salvadoran government and people and Ernesto Castro for hosting us. And I want to commend President Nayib Bukele for his hard work in countering the atrocities of gang violence and the narcotics trade. El Salvador now proudly stands, as we heard earlier, as having the lowest crime rate of any Latin American country. So much so that El Salvador stood proudly with the Trump administration to counter transnational criminal gangs such as MS-13, keeping them off the streets in their state-of-the-art prisons. And by countering crime, thanks to President Bukele's work, El Salvador broke historic crime-busting records to establish an economy that is thriving and open for business. You know, El Salvador stands as a strategic ally to the United States as we advance our shared interest in ensuring the Western Hemisphere is a place of prosperity and peace. El Salvador is a strong trading partner of the United States, buying in 2023. The United States bought from El Salvador bought from the United States in 2023 over $1.75 billion worth of petroleum, over $100 million worth of corn, and over $75 million worth of vehicles, while the U.S. greatly enjoys the benefits of El Salvador's knit industry, knit fabrics, and sugar industries. But while we peacefully trade, China and Russia have slowly advanced their interests across Latin America. They're an immigrant economic threat, securing military advantages such as ports and dual-use infrastructure, as well as spreading harmful propaganda. The Western Hemisphere has allowed Huawei, a weaponized Chinese telecoms firm, to grow its 4G and 5G infrastructure. And according to Keith Krach, who is the CEO of DocuSign and President Trump's former Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment, Huawei doesn't just have a back door, it has a front door for Chinese surveillance and intelligence gathering. During my time as ambassador, I successfully blocked Huawei from entering into a harmful deal that would have not only damaged the security of personal communications in Denmark, but also would have endangered all industrial infrastructures. As Western allies, we must make a strong commitment to oppose bad Chinese deals like I did in Denmark. The Chinese Communist Party has made it their mission to target countries like Peru, Mexico, and Colombia with their proximity to the Panama Canal and critical minerals and agriculture, as well as these countries' relative closeness to the United States. Specifically, the lithium triangle encompassing Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia is and has been a Chinese target. China has spent decades building control over mining of not just lithium, but other rare earths such as cobalt and graphite. China refines most of the world's lithium and controls 90% of the world's graphite. And this is an issue that's an imminent security threat. Green energies are unusually mineral intensive. Electric cars needing 6 times the rare earths as a conventional car, and offshore wind plants needing 9 times the rare earths that a gas-powered plant does. The world is behind. The Western world is behind. It takes on average 18 years to bring a new mine from discovery to mining. And the Western Hemisphere cannot rely on Chinese rare earths. We must diversify energy and streamline domestic mining and processing. It is imperative that we end the Chinese rare earth grab and seize this strategic economic opportunity, prioritizing economic prosperity of Latin America away from the chokehold of the Chinese Communist Party. Concurrently, Russia is reestablishing intelligence and propaganda networks throughout this region, frequently utilizing state media and disinformation campaigns to undermine pro-US and conservative-leaning governments In my own hotel room, I can find Russia TV or Russia Today, España in Spanish, and I can find CNN, but there's no conservative English language outlets like Newsmax or Fox News. But this is a conservative government. So Russia's capitalizing on regional instability and anti-American sentiment. Moscow's established tactics include propaganda, cyber operations, and alliances with left-leaning leaders. Russia disinformation disseminated through Spanish language media promotes anti-US narratives in Central and South America and the Caribbean, aiming to discredit democratic institutions and weaken the regional cohesion. Russia has also intensified military and intelligence cooperation in Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba, creating a network of influence near the United States. As the U.S. moves forward with President Trump's America First agenda, it is not alone. Rather, it's a movement that can be interpreted by all nations as we build unbreakable relationships in the Western Hemisphere. Nations first, just like America first. Nations that participate in the nations first agenda reap the benefits of a stronger and safer nation, just like President Bukele has done here in El Salvador. These benefits include securing one-zone borders and controlling immigration, economic prosperity through free market principles and fair trade, enforcing the rule of law, preserving your precious culture, and securing affordable and abundant energy, while reducing adversary energy reliance and rejecting failed globalist policies. Strong allies, strong trade, strong Americas. The Western Hemisphere is a priority for President Trump. Safeguarding neighboring countries from external manipulation is a strategic imperative. A stable, prosperous, sovereign Central and South America and Caribbean are vital for the security of the United States and our allies. Like President Bukele, we must say no more gangs, no more drugs, and I say no more backdoor deals with China and Russia. It's time we invigorate the nation's first approach by revitalizing American influence and investment in Latin America. Continue to forge robust security policies and partnerships, foster cultural diplomacy, and counter CCP infrastructure expansion. With US-led private investment and transparent regional development banks, as well as Exim Bank and the DFC, or Development Finance Corporation, let's move together. Let's move forward together. Let's protect our security by preventing Chinese firms like Huawei and ZTE from establishing surveillance infrastructure and expose Russian disinformation in Spanish language media with coordinated counter-narratives, supporting allies like El Salvador's leadership as they combat gangs, corruption, and transnational criminal organizations. By doing so, we will advance a safer, more prosperous, and sovereign Western Hemisphere, and we will all benefit. Thank you very much. God bless El Salvador, and God bless the United States of America. Thanks.
Ambassador, yes. I would just say, I misspoke. I said she was going to talk about critical minerals and energy, and it was much broader than that, but you delivered a critical message very energetically, so thank you. Okay. Carla, thanks for closing it out. That was great. Great message. Message for you all. So we reconvene tomorrow in this room at 8:45. We have a prayer breakfast and kick off the agenda at 9 o'clock. Great remarks today. I always learn a lot. I'm sure you did too. Tomorrow we get to hear about artificial intelligence, energy, more on energy and critical minerals, cryptocurrencies, cybersecurity, illicit finance, and money laundering, much more. So look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Between now and tomorrow, we have a reception at 7 o'clock tonight at the former presidential palace. And it's an opportunity to get together and get reacquainted, build new friendships, talk about what we learned today. And I understand buses are leaving at 6:30 and 7 o'clock from the Sheraton Hotel. And you should have got an email from Lucas on that as well. So look forward to seeing you there. Thanks again.